Okay. Meanwhile, just so you know,
it's 46,
47. The Lakers are up 47 to 46 points. In case you're
47-46?
Yeah,
in the
it's a
second
tight
quarter.
game.
Damn.
It's a
5
good
minutes
game.
left in the second
So
quarter.
now we care about the human rights of the people that we trade with. Is that the idea? And we do business with? We don't when it comes. What's that?
It's a question.
And we don't when it comes to Saudi Arabia and other countries.
Well,
We're
this is-
going to
this is-
sell them a
this is
lot of
the
weapons,
question.
and that's cool.
20 years.
But we don't care.
No, we've been
I heard the whole thing,
we've been
Joe.
in this marriage for a long time, and we've looked the other way for a lot
Right.
of problems with this marriage. And a lot of the problems have to do with
Right.
money and corporate. And
Yes.
For
But
as
then
much
you have-
as we're trashing the NBA, we could trash all the
But then you have the
multinationals.
Business Roundtable coming out saying that every company's supposed to have a purpose and a mission and a this and a that.
Well, you knew that was a joke.
Well,
when they
I'm
said
not
it.
saying it's a joke. I'm saying, does it change the dynamic with which these
Can I
companies
add another element to it? Having
Yep.
spent a little bit of time overseas and watched U.S. foreign policy, which was the idea was that if we made them more capitalist,
Yes.
Right.
they could become more democratic. And
Right.
I think you guys are both right.
They're more capitalist.
One guy brings up TPP,
Right.
which was an idea what would have brought them into labor standards, or would have sort of surrounded them with labor standards and environmental one. And then Joe was right. The Dems abandoned it just as surely as the
I
Republicans
just want to
did.
read you, because we were talking about this. There's an op-ed in the New York Times today by, let me give you, let me
don't
tell you
do
who
that,
wrote it.
please.
Farhad Manjoo. No, this it's fascinating because he writes in no uncertain terms. He says, it turns out the West's entire political theory, the one you're just talking about China's been spectacularly wrong. China's engineered ferocious economic growth in the past half century, but China's growth has not come at any cost to the regime's political chokehold.
Let me tell
and
you
he goes
this.
on to say, a darker truth is now dawning on the world. China's economic miracle hasn't just failed to liberate Chinese people, it has also now routinely corrupted the rest of us outside of China.
Can I just respond to that? And I have just a little bit of experience with it, not a lot, but this is this. One program worked in Russia. It's when we brought Russians over and when we employed them in U.S. companies. That worked really well in terms of showing them both U.S. business methods and U.S. democratic
Unfortunately,
methods.
that's how we lost a lot of intellectual property.
Not to the Russians.
Not to the Russians. When we did business with Chinese.
Some intellectual property, and others we just ended up. The other thing is that if you make a bigger middle class, the entire drift of humanity is greater wealth comes with demands for greater political freedom. I just want to finish it.
And
Let me finish.
Argument, by the way.
Let me finish. The question is, when do you pull the plug to evaluate the program and say it's not working? The idea that China eventually will be a country that provides some measure of political freedom to its growing, wealthier middle class, I think it's not time to give up the ghost on that.
Right.
I'm a globalist. I'm about engagement. I don't think what we did before was not working, and now I'll just leave it to you guys to debate.
Culturally, we're going to. I mean, it's just complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated how it finally works out, and you are trying to become a consumer culture instead of a producing. I mean, there's a lot economy, but at least, man,
there's one thing we knew, Joe, which is that Chinese people were demanding much more environmental accountability of their local governments as they got wealthier there. Maybe not political freedom, but certainly there was a lot more of an environmental.
And not everyone knows.
Because a lot of them were getting really sick.
No, that's right.
You were the model for the Americans. I don't know if anyone has seen that TV show.
Oh, absolutely. No, my kids believe my wife and I to be Russian spies because at the table.
Do you have an FBI guy living next to you?
Not as far as we know.
Jim Comey?
Not as far as I know. But
he's very tall.
He may be there and not even know it.
How is Jeff Daniels going to play him? It's not tall enough. Anyway, the United Auto Workers strike against GM has reached its fourth week. Wage losses for workers and suppliers are mounting quickly. Joining us now to talk more about the growing fallout, Patrick Anderson, Principal and CEO at Anderson Economic Group. They've been releasing reports weekly on the financial impact of the strike. It's adding up, is it not, Patrick? Is it adding up to the point where both sides are saying, all right, we're ready to do some things?
It's adding up to quite a bit, and now in the fourth week, and essentially it's going to be the entire fourth week, and now we're looking at potentially part of the fifth week of lost wages. Most of these workers have now lost 2 paychecks. Now, they tend to be well-paid workers, but few Americans can take 2 paycheck losses. And General Motors, even last week, we said they'd lost $660 million. Their average daily losses now are about $90 million, we estimate. So it is a very, very expensive strike now that has hit the entire southeastern Michigan economy. It's cost over $400 million in lost wages. That was last week. It's going to be more this week. So it's expensive for both sides.
People forget that becomes payroll tax and federal income tax and Michigan income tax. And so, Michigan isn't really a place that's so flush that it can afford this either, I don't think.
No, the economy has been slowing. The Midwestern economy has been reasonably good recently, but the economy is slowing. Auto sales are slowing, as you just noted. Transaction prices for autos are going down because demand is slowing. We've sold record numbers of cars. The automobile industry in the United States is healthy. We've got good products. However, companies like General Motors still have a cost disadvantage when you look at the most efficient of their rivals. And that's really what most of this debate is about. It's, as I've written about here, there's three big issues on the table, and the least difficult to deal with is just plain money, which would be a wage increase for the workers, which General Motors said at the beginning they were willing to offer. So there's big issues on the table, which is why the strike's now, headed through a complete month, why the expense to the workers, the expense to suppliers, the expense to the company is adding up. And I'm actually quite concerned if we go into a fifth week.
Where are all the suppliers? All of them in Michigan? Many of them are in Lansing?
Right around Lansing, East Lansing, we have two of the major General Motors assembly plants here that produce a lot of the products, also Flint. But you have Michigan, you have northern Indiana, you have Ohio, and then you have places, for example, in Kentucky and Tennessee and Texas. But the Midwest is still the center of the American auto industry. Ontario also is very important, especially the Ontario basically from Windsor out to London. That area of the country, that area of the continent produces an enormous share of the manufactured goods. Right now we're looking at, if you define that as a state, we'd essentially be looking at something like a single quarter recession in this area of the country, going well outside of the automobile industry. And a lot of towns which have auto industry employment dominating the economy are really feeling the pinch.
Michigan's an important state for the election, too. I just wonder, who's going to blink, do you think, Patrick?
It's not just blinking here. If it was 3 days...
Yeah, we talk about it with China, too. I mean, who needs a deal more?
Well, both these parties are intertwined. Remember, if General Motors doesn't make profits and make products that consumers want to buy, there aren't any jobs for the UAW. And if General Motors adjusts its work so it's moving its plants around wherever it wants and acts like, say, an electronics manufacturing company, the UAW may not feel it has a role, or its workers may not feel that it has a role. So there are serious issues on the table here. General Motors leadership signaled this very clearly last fall when they unallocated those three storied plants that had reputations and histories, and that they need to be competitive in order to weather the next downturn. And that's really what's the major sticking point on the table. It's not just about money, it's about the future.
All right. You optimistic about the rest of your schedule? Michigan, I mean, I'm not. I'm worried about you, with what I've seen so far. Are you worried?
I am worried, yes.
I bet you're worried. You got some tough games coming up. Good luck, though. And we appreciate you coming on today, and hopefully this works out as well eventually.
Yeah.
Patrick. All right.
Okay, coming up when we return, what to watch ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street. Bank of America's Savita Subramanian is going to be joining us to make some sense of this week's wild market moves. Check out the futures at this hour. We're about 45 minutes before the market opens, and we'd open down. Dow off about 36 points, NASDAQ off 10 points, S&P 500 off 3.5 points. Stay tuned. You're watching Squawk on CNBC.
We could play epic music, or we could speak in an overdramatic tone, or even set off fireworks. But that's just not smarty. Instead, we let our offer do the talking. Right now, you can grab 25% off our unlimited data SIM. That's just $18.75 a month with no speed restrictions, no credit check, and no long contract to tie you in. Now that's smarty. Just search Smarty Mobile and switch today. It's easy. Offer available for a limited time only. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Here at LNER, we love giving you more value. And we all love more, don't we? More sleep, more sun, more me time. So we've added our new Azuma trains with more seats and more great value fares. In fact, there are 3,773 more £29 single tickets every week on our Azuma trains between London and Leeds. Brilliant. Book direct to lner.co.uk, launching alongside existing LNER trains.
The B&Q 3 for 2 offer is now on, including an unmissable 3 for 2 on tiles and flooring, like real wood and laminate. So hurry to B&Q. You can do it when you're 3 for 2 it. Excludes cut-to-measure flooring, flooring accessories and underlay. Every third item per single transaction in descending price order free. Offer ends November 3rd. See DIY.com.
Next time you look up at the stars, think about this.
Inside you are the remains of a stellar explosion. You are made of stardust. And without the stars, there wouldn't be us.
I'm Guy Raz, the wonders of the universe and the people who still look up every night. Next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
Welcome back to Squawk Box, everybody. The futures this morning are indicated a little bit weaker, although it seems that the markets at this point are waiting to take their next cues on what's happening with the China-U.S. trade talks. Right now, the Dow futures down by about 33 points. S&P futures off by 3. The NASDAQ off by 9.
And the closely watch. Oh, we're not going to do that, I guess. We were. Boy, did you see how they did that at the very last minute? Andrew.
Yes. Let's take a look at a few stocks to watch right now. Check out shares of Sprint this morning and T-Mobile at the same time, because here's what's going on. Some good news for both of those companies. Mississippi dropping its legal challenge to the proposed $26 billion merger between the two wireless carriers. And this comes following an agreement between the two sides, which would, among other things, expand high-speed internet access to the state's rural areas. You're looking at Sprint stock up just marginally, T-Mobile off just slightly. A little bit of that's an ARB play, but also take a look at shares of Dow component United Health. The stock downgraded to hold from buy at Jefferies, which points to tough competition from healthcare rivals Anthem, as well as policy uncertainty related to recent court rulings and, of course, the upcoming presidential election, which has taken a toll really much on the whole space.
We're going to start this. We're going to talk to Savita, I think, and eventually, if we come out of commercial break, we may be able to check.
I'll tell you, the Nets are up 57 to 55 at halftime.
Yep.
At halftime.
At halftime. So we're at a break.
Yeah, we're at a
break in the action.
We're breaking the action. It's a preseason exhibition NBA game, but it happens to be in China.
Yeah, very closely watched.
Yeah. Who are we hoping for? Guess we're hoping for the Lakers to beat the Alibaba guy.
Well, I was thinking the Nets because they're here, but.
What do you think, Sorkin? Do we want the Lakers to beat the Alibaba guy?
I'm a New Yorker. I was a Nets guy back when the Nets were in Jersey. And the Knicks are so terrible. I mean, what the Dolans have done to the Knicks it makes me so upset that I just have to root for the Nets.
All right.
At this point.
We'll talk.
Sorry.
The closely we're watching. I can't believe it. The closely watched Lakers and Nets game is underway in Shanghai. China's government reportedly prohibited team and NBA post-game news conferences for the latest. You're not allowed to wear anything here either, are you, Becky? You can't wear something that says, what's a Uyghur or something, or a Uyghur?
Well, it was a Washington game.
A Washington game
in this
country.
Game where the fans had Google Uyghur.
Google Uyghur.
And they had T-shirts on, and they kicked them out. They took their signs and kicked them out.
And ESPN. ESPN, it's crazy. They've resorted to talking about sports. I mean, who would have ever thought that ESPN would be talking about sports? Jonathan Chang is China bureau chief at the Wall Street Journal. Are you a basketball fan too, John?
I am, but I'm a Raptors guy because I'm from up north. But,
oh my God!
But yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
You've had a few things.
Fun week.
What a great year that was. I mean, I even became a Ich bin ein Raptors fan. I think we're all Raptors fans after last year. So. Is there any way the NBA comes out of this without looking bad? I just don't see how they do this now, John.
Yeah, no, I don't think there really is a way for them to come out of this unscathed. I mean, there is a little bit of damned if you do, damned if you don't on an apology, because China, makes it so black or white. They really aren't really in the mood to brook with any sort of compromise. So you either got to go all in or you got to get out of the country. And, it's possible that the NBA manages to get through this and, without being blocked entirely. But it is going to be tough going for the next couple of days, that's for sure.
Is there any way they could give China the apology that it's looking for? and just say, it is, other companies in the United States, everybody understands what's happening here. 1.4 billion consumers, 500 million basketball fans or more or whatever. I mean, we kind of understand that they're over a barrel, don't we? Or do we really want them to be the one entity that stands up and says, all right, it's not going to be about money, it's going to be about human rights? Does anyone really expect them to be able to do that?
No, maybe only the most idealistic are going to expect that to happen. But at the same time, I mean, the NBA has so much more clout than many of the other brands that come in here. Arguably, China needs the NBA as much as the NBA needs China. Now, of course, that's a thesis that the NBA may not really want to test, but, that's what a lot of people are saying, and they have a point. But, in our conversations with Chinese basketball fans, no one would dare talk to the Wall Street Journal and say otherwise, but they all say, look, I love basketball. I've been a basketball fan since Yao Ming was drafted, but China, country comes first, basically. And so that's sort of the debate that people are sort of weighing in their heads here. And I think the NBA, if they're smart, I think they hear these comments and they realize that
if there's any entity that can say you need us more than we need you, I mean, even Apple, I don't think can say that. So of all maybe the NBA is the one entity that can say that has some sway over China because it's so important.
John, I just wanted to play back this quote. We were talking about it earlier with Steve Leisman. This is in the New York Times today in an op-ed. It says, China's economic miracle hasn't just failed to liberate Chinese people. It is now routinely corrupting the rest of us outside of China. What do you make of that?
Yeah, look, that's an argument that's made by a lot of folks right now who are saying that engagement with China, over the last 20, 30 years hasn't really brought the democracy and the sort of gains that we had expected, that political liberalization would accompany economic liberalization. That's a thesis that I think we're still all trying to figure out here. And, some people have already made their determination, but I think with each one of these episodes, we get a new test case. And the NBA is interesting because it doesn't follow the playbook that we've seen in the past, where it's usually just cave in and apologize. And, a lot of people back in the States are saying that the NBA could have shown more spine, but they actually arguably have shown more than others. So whether or not it's enough, that's a different debate. But certainly, this story isn't finished yet.
We could get a payoff quickly. I mean, things happen quickly, and who knows whether Hong Kong is not the beginning of the, you pull on a thread, and who knows whether that brings something like I don't know, for lack of a better word, an Arab Spring or something like that. Maybe not, maybe not. But that whole thesis, Andrew, could change in an instant, theoretically. All right, John, thank you. You want to leave your IFB and we'll update you on the score again in a couple of minutes because we're all...
It's halftime.
Oh, it's halftime.
It's halftime.
Right. Once they start again. Is it the normal halftime? Probably. It's a time difference.
All right, we are under an hour till the opening bell on Wall Street, so let's talk markets and what you should be watching today. Joining us right now is Savita Subramanian. She is the Managing Director and Head of U.S. Equity and Quantitative Strategy at BofA Merrill Lynch Global Research. Savita, we're watching China. It's not just about the NBA game, but all of this falls into the trade talks.
It's not just basketball.
What do you tell people ahead of this?
Ahead of this? Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think that so far the market has appreciated any sort of ceasefire or signs of reconciliation. But I think the real question is, do we want a hasty trade deal if it comes at the expense of long-term growth? So that's the question is, this isn't just about soybeans, it's about tech, it's about national security, and I think that those are the issues that companies and investors need to be thinking about. So here are our trade ideas. I think defense seems like a great place to be in the fourth quarter and for the foreseeable future because of these tensions? Because of these tensions, because of geopolitical tensions across the globe. I mean, we're hitting a fever pitch in terms of income inequality, in terms of globalization shifting to protectionism. There are all sorts of competing forces that I think will bolster the idea that nobody is going to cut defense spending at this point in time, right? That would be a pretty short-sighted thing to do.
Although you could see a situation where it's going to be a very nationalistic spending, and you're only going to get dollars coming from your home country.
Potentially. So I think the other argument to your point is go domestic. So think about U.S. companies that are going to benefit from U.S. growth. And for now, multinationals look a little bit risky. I mean, one of the things that we track assiduously in our quantitative work is earnings revisions. And we've noticed that analysts have been revising up expectations for domestic companies far more than for multinationals. So I think what we're seeing across the globe is a lot of uncertainty about this idea that has globalization actually been good for corporate America? I mean, it's been great for margins, but has it really been good for a competitive standing?
Do you think Elizabeth Warren would slash defense spending?
So that the Warren factor, I think, is something that we need to talk about separately.
Separately.
So I think that there is a lot of optics and fear around the idea of a Warren win, and that being negative for corporates writ large, as well as for defense spending. From a political perspective, the one sector that I think we want to avoid heading into the elections is healthcare, because healthcare is a sector. It's down, but I think it could go down further. So if you look back in 2015, we had the same story. In 2015, healthcare was super crowded by investors. It's super crowded today. Then you started to see campaign season heat up. The sector dropped, I think it underperformed by like 25%.
It's one of the only sectors where they're looking for growth in this earnings season. I just went through sector by sector call.
Yeah, no, earnings have been great. Fundamentals have been great. They were great back in 2015, 2016. But what mattered more was headlines and politics. And I think that that's keeping generalist investors out of healthcare for the time being.
Savita, thank you. Good
to see you.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Meantime, I want to get down to the New York Stock Exchange, where our good friend Jim Cramer joins us now. A couple of stocks that we could talk about if you want. We could also talk about the NBA in China if you like, Jim.
Do you have a score, or is it still?
We're in halftime. We're in halftime, but curious to get.
Because Kenny Atkinson is a fabulous coach, and I'd love to hear what he has to say, because he's probably one of the more thoughtful people. The Nets pretty free spirited, but remember who the Nets are owned by, so maybe Coach Kenny is in a jam here.
Who are you rooting for?
Look, I just actually ordered a Nets package. The Nets are fun.
What's your take on how to play today's market, given what's taking place with China or not? And we don't know, obviously, in Washington.
You know what? I've been trying. I mean, it's very interesting discussion you just had about healthcare. There is a diminishing number of stocks that you can like here almost every day. And I find, for instance, I had Hormel today. I've got my Hormel pumpkin spice Spam. This thing sold out in 7 hours. But if you're just down there buying Hormel, you're kind of running out of ideas. And I think that there's a tremendous lack of new ideas and old ideas to buy. And that's part of the problem. Delta looked good, and then you got to sell Delta. I mean, this is, wow, it's a tough time.
Okay. I want to hear more of your ideas on Delta, but I'm sure you'll be talking about that and Squawk on the Street in just a couple of minutes, where we will see you. Stay tuned, though, because Squawk returns in just a moment.
Through the cloud.
Will the retirement you get be the retirement you want? Check your state pension and see how you can build on it with a workplace or other pension. Get to know your pension at yourpension.gov.uk.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
It's going to be mild today, but with the worst of winter yet to reach London, you don't want to come home to a broken boiler. We're with you. So that's why with British Gas Home Care, we've got your boiler covered 365 days a year. We have thousands of engineers on hand to help get your boiler up and running again, and all from just 46p a day. Buy selected home care products online by the 28th of October and get 1 month free. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions apply. Prices vary by postcode.
If you can drive a van that's built in Britain, with class-leading fuel economy on every run, to Middlesex to do some masonry, or to Tunbridge carrying well over a ton, yours is the all-new Vauxhall Vivaro, and you'll be driving a great Brit van, my son. All-new Vauxhall Vivaro carries British business. To find out more, search New Vauxhall Vivaro.
The chance of being abducted by aliens is about 1 in 7 million. Oh, unlucky. Never mind, at Curry's PC World, there's a 1 in 10 chance to get half your money back on all 2019 LG OLED TVs, like the LG C9, described by Which as simply the best. Its Dolby Atmos gives you a surround sound experience that's out of this world, and there's up to £500 off. So the question is, are you feeling lucky at Curry's PC World? T's and C's apply. GB16 plus. See currys.co.uk.
Chase the sun with TUI to over 40 long-haul destinations. Explore the beautiful beaches of Jamaica, sip margaritas in Mexico, or see the many wonders of Asia. And until the 26th of October, enjoy £150 off per booking. When you fly with us, we'll take you there on one of our state-of-the-art Dreamliner planes. TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. T's and C's apply. Minimum spend £1,200 and available on selected holidays. See website for details. Atoll protected.
We take you to Washington, D.C. Just a few moments ago, the Treasury Secretary and the Chinese delegation arriving at USTR, if this video rolls, as we have just endured a wild overnight session in futures as we got a bunch of conflicting headlines about U.S.-China trade. What we do know is that the delegation arrives today at USTR for U.S.-China trade talks, and of course we have complete coverage this morning. Keep an eye on Europe as well. 10 years back above 1.6 this morning as September CPI runs cool, up 1.7 year on year. Good Thursday morning. Welcome to Squawk on the Street. I'm Carl Quintanilla with Jim Cramer, David Faber at the New York Stock Exchange. Jim, we know what we went through last night, some of these tape bombs about travel schedules and currency plans, the Times with the piece about limiting access to American capital now.
We have become hostage to events that are not only totally out of our hands, but I think totally out of the president's hands, in the sense that there are different things that come out. We had this mini bear market at one point. The futures were down, equivalent of the S&P down 1.2%. And then we came out with a statement that says that maybe we'll do a little business with Huawei.
Well, we didn't come out with a statement. The New York Times actually reported, citing sources that there might be non-essential equipment.
Well, okay, but you understand what I mean? It's meaning that there's a story floated. Let me be more accurate.
Yeah,
and that made it so that the bear market of last night ended. No stocks were even trading. I mean, it's kind of amazing. When people started the futures in 1984, did they ever envision a world where there doesn't even have to be stocks trading? This is outright gambling. Yeah. If there's no stocks trading, it's just gambling.
Right.
And I just feel like the momentum behind these talks is new. I can't believe they're even having talks after what's gone through this week.
Never know.
But well,
I mean, you can't listen. Lighthizer, the contradictory nature of this sometimes that we see from the administration, whether it's Navarro contradicting Kudlow, who's contradicting Lighthizer, who's contradicting Mnuchin, who's contradicting the president's tweets, and it makes it very difficult, one would think, for an investor to try to figure anything out, except that you can go in with some expectation, for example, that maybe tariffs will not be increased to 30%, and maybe the new ones on the $156 billion won't go into effect at 15% in December.
The October 15th, the tariff, that's what's in play. And I think that the market goes up if that's held off. That was the tariff bump in peak. Remember, that was in peak where the president was very angry. The problem is, can we just go back to this market and accept the fact that it is just impossible? I mean, Apple, okay? So you sell Apple on the news that the trade talks are going badly, and then Apple removes an app which is in keeping with all of Apple's ethos of don't endanger people, as actually is endangering police people. And then do you buy Apple off that? Well, you get an upgrade Apple because Apple's doing better with the 11, but then you start thinking if the trade talks go badly. I am describing just an unfathomable market where if you have conviction, you're out of your mind.
Well, we're in a bit of a bottleneck where our fundamentals are subject to one binary outcome, right? And that is whether these talks go, quote, well or not.
I was working on Bed Bath this morning, and the change there with Tritton, who is really a heavyweight, by the way, comes from Target, CMO of Target, he's going to be the CEO of Bed Bath. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing my work, and I forgot, wait a second, how much is from China?
Right.
I mean, am I kidding myself? I mean, I know the Target has a lot of brands. They know how to source. Maybe he knows how to source like Target. Target has tremendous power to be able to jawbone prices, but I forgot to ask about China. And I realized, well, then, I don't know, a missing piece of the puzzle?
Without
China is the missing piece of the puzzle at all times.
Yeah, certainly for companies like that. Well, I mean, for Apple, which has 52 billion reasons to, as in the dollars that they bring in from China every year, to make sure that things continue to be good for them over there.
Right. Well, Washington, I want people to own Facebook. Okay, Zuckerberg in front of Congress. Do you sell Facebook because Zuckerberg's in front of Congress? Washington, I had Hormel on today. Okay, so you would think, is there anything more simple than Hormel? This is the pumpkin spice Spam. This sold out in 7 hours, David. 7 hours.
Yeah. Well,
I'm mentioning this because you know what matters to them? China and swine flu. Because the Chinese want hogs. They got a hog shortage.
They take numbers down 176 to 180 versus about prior 171 185, right?
Yeah.
Still above the street.
I know, but how can you not be beleaguered by the idea that there isn't anything? I'll give you a new one. Do you know that tanker rates are up huge for oil to sell? It's Spam, David. It's budgies and Spam. It's like Monty Python. It's Monty Python. So it has some ingredients besides Spam in it?
It's actually not bad.
No. Actually, Hormel is the Hormel's new burger has the least of enemies, but
it does have a lot of saturated fat.
We should go to Kayla, don't you think?
Kayla Tao, she's outside USTR. Going to be a very full day of coverage. Kayla, good morning.
Good morning, Carl. We just saw the reception outside the U.S. Trade Representative's office of the Vice Premier of China. He was received by the U.S. Trade Representative and the Treasury Secretary. They all put on a good face. It was a congenial greeting, smiles, back pats, posing for a photo op for the media that is assembled for the most suspenseful moment in this protracted trade dispute on U.S. soil that I can remember. You've had the truces in Buenos Aires and in Osaka, Japan. But this is really a critical moment here in this dispute because you have the specter of tariffs going up next Tuesday. You have the mid-December tariffs on a wide variety of consumer goods that many principals on the U.S. side believe would be incredibly damaging to the economy. And then you have both sides essentially throwing a whole lot of options against the wall via the press to really set a crowded negotiating table and show the other side maybe what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do to telegraph their position ahead of these talks. What we do know, the president hasn't made up his mind. A senior administration official told me that last night, despite all of what we've learned about China's position, about the U.S. position in recent days. David, you mentioned that it's become confusing for investors to follow this back and forth. It's become confusing to reporters as well. Last night, when Chinese media was reporting that the delegation could cut its trip early, the White House had no idea. Administration officials were still saying it would go through Friday. There would be a fancy dinner tonight, signaling that talks were expected to be robust and go well. And then that changed tune in the space of about an hour, with a principal in talks telling CNBC the situation is fluid. Whether they extend till tomorrow is an open question. We know the Chinese have played this game before. They have used the idea that they could cut talks early if they're not going well, or extend them if they feel they're productive, as a way to entice the U.S. side to put more on the table. We'll see what happens today. Of course, we wish we could be a fly on the wall in the negotiating room, but we'll rely on our reporting and what information we can get in the meantime. Guys?
Kayla, you mentioned, of course, the difficulty in trying to understand what might transpire. You bring up the president as well. I mean, he's clearly a wild card here because he can make a decision that perhaps is at odds even with the negotiators in the room. Isn't that right?
That is exactly right. And it's unclear exactly where his mindset is right now. 3 weeks ago, he said he would not do a partial deal. He would not seek agricultural purchases as part of an interim deal. He didn't want a mini deal. And then just a few days later, he asked his Treasury Secretary, why didn't they buy agriculture? Why didn't we do that again? I thought we wanted them to do that. And a lot of officials that I speak to say that maybe the devil is really in the marketing, how you build this to President Trump. Maybe not as a mini deal or an interim deal, if that is what's on the table and what the two sides are discussing, but as a mile marker, as a point of progress, as a way to temporarily pause the dispute and make sure that there are dates in the future where China can be held accountable and ways that the U.S. can retain leverage over China in that way. Yes, the marketing, I think, to the president has been a challenge from officials up until this point, and we're not sure at this point exactly where the president is on this, except that he has not made up his mind as of last night.
Kayla, Jim, one of the things that I'm confounded by is that there is a hardcore list from Peter Navarro. 7 things that have to happen before there's going to be any progress with the talks. A lot of it has to do with intellectual property, some of it has to do with fentanyl, state-subsidized institutions. Doesn't the president subscribe to the 7 deadly sins as a reason that if you don't check off on them, there's not going to be a big deal?
He certainly has in the past, Jim, but the question is whether the landscape for the president has changed, whether the agita from the impeachment inquiry, whether the looming election and caucuses in Iowa just a few months away, whether hearing from his agriculture secretary, who has been out on the road in the Midwest at these town halls where farmers are incredibly angry about their dire financial situation, whether those messages are overpowering Navarro's 7 deadly sins. That is the question for the president at this point, what he feels the calculus is that he needs to make at this exact moment in time, given the election, given the state of the American economy, and the fact that some of his officials, including Larry Kudlow just last week, said, we're concerned about manufacturing. We don't see a recession in sight, but we're concerned about some of this data.
Yeah, Kayla, even as we're speaking to you, and we saw that arrival, South China Morning Post, of course, one of the media outlets that we watch in relation to these trade talks says dim prospects for deal as China and U.S. resume talks. We're going to have to take all of this into consideration, as well as your reporting, Kayla, which has been exemplary. We'll come back to you a lot today. Kayla Tausche outside USTR. Of course, the fallout between China and the NBA continues. The Brooklyn Nets are playing the Lakers in Shanghai right now. CCTV and Tencent not airing that preseason game. Part of the backlash against that tweet from Houston Rockets GM Daryl Morey showing support for protesters in Hong Kong. NBA had planned to hold a post-game briefing. Now says Commissioner Silver and the players would not be made available to the media. China Daily had a graphic of the NBA logo with a bomb in the player's hand rather than a basketball. So that's not going well either.
No, look, I think that there's a lot of people really on the spot here. I've been very sympathetic to the idea of, say, Coach Atkinson, who is such a terrific guy.
The Nets coach.
And then the owner of the Nets.
Joe Tsai.
So, if you're in the NFL, we would say, hey, no problem. You can't say anything. Remember, the NFL really has no freedom of speech. It's regulated very tightly. Adam Silver has rebelled against that. I almost feel like the NBA either has to go toward an NFL model or has to say, you know what? We have way too many people who feel that free speech is core value.
I think that's what he said. Isn't that kind of what Mr. Silver said?
We will not compromise on free speech.
But the owners don't feel that way. A lot of the owners are willing to compromise.
Well, but this is a different league than the NFL, Jim. You know that. The players have a lot more power here. They've had a lot more partnership, if you can, with ownership than I think is the case in the NFL. I think that's fair to say.
It is difficult to switch to an NFL
They have more power.
The players
than
have
the
a lot
NFL.
more power.
Yes.
That's very true. And the players have historically had tremendous things to say. And I just wonder whether it just means that did the Chinese not think it would come? Or are the Chinese panicking over Hong Kong? Are they panicking?
Panicking how? What do you mean?
Does it really matter if the general manager of the Houston Rockets thinks that there should be free speech in Hong Kong? Are they that short-sighted and that temperamental? I don't think anyone's talking about the notion of, is a regime threatened by Adam Silver? Are they threatened by a thoughtful NBA committee? Is that what that society has become? Think about it. Even the Russians, at their absolute worst, would never be threatened by an NBA commissioner. I just find this to be a farce. That this great country, which has done so much for its people, is scared of a player. Can you imagine if LeBron talked? These guys are men of principle.
I don't see the repression of free speech in China as being a new thing at all.
No, but
this is part of a pattern that's been elevated because of the tensions regarding the two countries.
I'm saying Hong Kong, to endorse Hong Kong has always been an issue. But I just think that had you ever asked any NBA player about the repression in China, maybe they would have said something. Were they all just whistling past this graveyard of repression? That's what I want to know. On the altar of sneaker deals?
I think there was an expectation that we would sort of export our values along with our sports.
Well, yes, and that's the WTO theory, which by the way, Peter Navarro thought is, wait a second, wasn't there supposed to be, when China joined the Council of Nations, that they were going to loosen any restrictions? They've gotten tighter. I mean, let's understand, this regime is far different from the previous regime. This regime is hardline in the way that Mao was hardline. Maybe even more hardline than Zhou Enlai.
Maybe. You do have a leader for life now.
Who's consolidated a lot of power.
Isn't that Maoist?
Perhaps.
I don't know.
Look, there was some opposition.
Look, I think this is the biggest story out there, because I really think, I'm not kidding, I think that the Hong Kong story is chronically underplayed in our country. You can't every weekend have a protest.
It's very important, but I can think of any number of other geopolitical issues. There's something going on right now in Syria that potentially could be.
That's not geopolitical. That's not in our marketplace. We don't do business with the Kurds as much as they were our greatest ally in the Middle East until about 48 hours of phone call.
It could lead to
they were great allies.
Things that will take up a lot more of our attention. Well, hopefully not.
I'm just saying that Hong Kong, that the Chinese communists have not been able to figure out how to do a non-Tiananmen Square shutdown of the protesters. And they must be losing face every minute over there. And the South China paper, they can do whatever they want, but they can't seem to stop the protesters. And if I were the Chinese Communist government, I'd be saying,